Welcome to Built to Finish. I'm your host, Stephen Pivnik. Join me each week as we explore the journeys of audacious goal setters. This includes experienced founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs sharing pivotal moments that propel their success. We'll also be talking with endurance athletes who push the limits of physical and mental ability. This show is brought to you by Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services to help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Built to Finish. Today's guest is a professional EOS implementer, international keynote and TEDx speaker, and best-selling author. As CEO of a century-old fourth-generation family business, he has successfully guided his family's company through generational transition and significant economic and cultural change to become an aligned, sustainable, nine-figure business. As a coach and advisor, he has a rich history of taking his own lessons and triumphs and applying them to coaching and mentorship. After transforming his life and becoming an elite world championship qualifying triathlete, he coaches dozens of triathletes across their first Ironman triathlon finish line. He is the host of the Fearless Family Business Podcast, also CEO at Hill Brothers Chemical Company. Adam Hill, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. I love being here today. I appreciate you having me. And every conversation we have is exciting, so I'm thrilled.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine, and I know we have so many topics in common that we can cover. So let's get right to them.
Absolutely.
Yes. So your journey from addiction to Ironman and then business success is truly inspiring. What was a turning point when you went from that dark side of your life to where you started seeing the light and started accomplishing all these great things both in business and in sports?
Yeah, so really the turning point for me came back in 2012. When I got sober, and it was not just an epiphany moment where I just decided, hey, I'm going to change my life today. I was really kind of thrust into it, and the whole decade before that, growing up, giving some context, I grew up with just like this just underlying worry that I always had. I was always felt always very socially awkward. Didn't really feel comfortable approaching other people or being friends with other people. Was bullied a lot because of that, and just but generally I had an okay childhood. But I discovered alcohol really when I went to college, when I started college.
Okay, as most of us do.
As most of us do, right? Yeah, and for most, for a lot of people, I think they discover it, they realize it's fun, they can kind of take it or leave it, and then get to studying and doing all of that stuff. But I found I mean, with my personality, I found it to be an incredible social elixir that just like I was talking to girls now, I was making friends, and I was getting all of this positive reinforcement, and for about a few months to a year, it was all really good. It was all really fun. And then it became fun with problems, as they say, like where, there was fun. And then like I'd get arrested for being drunk in public or, all of these kinds of different things. And I still wasn't able to put the pieces together on like that this was a problem. And then I started having panic attacks when I turned about 20 or 21 years old. And my first panic attack, I didn't know what it was because this was like 1999. And we didn't really talk about things like panic attacks back then. It was just, but I remember I was studying for this organic chemistry exam, and I all of a sudden just got this huge wave of like, oh my gosh, I've got a horrible disease. At the time, there was like HIV was running rampant, and for some weird reason that just my brain latched onto this idea. What if I have that? And it was a ridiculous thought. There was no reason to think that for me, but I just attached to it and had this massive panic attack. I thought I was going to die. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tightening, and that was like the first panic attack I'd have of many that would be related to a variety of just ridiculous things, like I've got cancer, or I've got the police are after me. What if I did something wrong? Yeah.
So these were like liquor induced panic attacks.
Yeah. I think that it's kind of a chicken or egg thing, really, because I wasn't drunk when I experienced the panic attack, but in like, I think what alcohol tended to do for me, and I think it does a lot for this a lot to other people with maybe anxiety disorders is it amplifies, when you drink, it takes all of that anxiety away, but when you sober up, it amplifies it. And so I think it kinda triggered it in that way, and so I wasn't a constant drunk. I was more of a weekend warrior, binge drinker, because I recognized I had to try to function as a human being. And, long story short, I became a problem drinker, active alcoholic for about the next decade or more, and tried to function as a normal human being, was able to go to work and justify that I could drink heavily because I was still, quote, unquote, "functioning." And it was not a great life. It was just constantly, just all of this dread that was just interrupted by numbness that I would put myself through. And in 2012, I broke the very last rule that I said that I would never ever break, and I got behind the wheel of a car, in a blackout, and I ended up, getting in an accident, and fortunately, nobody was hurt. But I spent the night in that jail not knowing what had happened, and I was my own worst enemy as I sat in the jail cell because I didn't know who I had hurt. I'd never wanna hurt anybody in my life, and, even to this day, it still makes me emotional, of course, but
As it should. I mean, it's amazing how a lot of people just need to hit rock bottom before they start rising up again, right?
absolutely, and I battled with myself that night on whether or not I should, because I knew at that point I didn't have any control over my life. I didn't have control over alcohol, and I didn't really I was now a danger to other people, not just myself. And so my choices in the jail cell were really I could kill myself because I'm I don't I might be a danger to others, or I could try to get help. And so I fortunately chose the latter, and I got help, and I learned AA.
Thank
Yeah.
you for that, by the way.
Yes, and I always wanna emphasize that because that at our darkest moments, that choice comes up a lot, and I know this may be a trigger warning kinda thing, but I just wanna reinforce to anybody out there that's struggling with that has done something that is trapped in this darkness, or has done something that they feel is so terrible that they can't recover from. There is recovery beyond it, and there's a great life, and I hope that the rest of this episode kinda sheds light on how great it can be. So needless to say, that got me into the rooms of AA, and that was what I would call my first transformation.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing, and it's a great way to start because let's get that dark stuff behind us, and let's talk about all the wonderful things that have occurred since that transformational moment. So, at what point did you tell yourself that you want to become a triathlete and an Ironman competitor?
Yeah, so I spent that very first year of sobriety, 2012 to 2013. It was January 22nd of 2012 when I got sober, walked out of the jail cell, didn't have another drink again. And I walked into the rooms of AA, and I sat in that seat in Alcoholics Anonymous every single day for that entire year. So a lot of people do 90 meetings in 90 days. I did I did a meeting every day for that first year.
365 meetings.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely needed that, and it became just a part of who I was. I immersed myself in a community, and that was the first time too that I immersed myself in a community, because previous to that, I was just this lone wolf. I didn't really wanna engage with people, and so I isolated, and I realized after that how important the community part was of building this community. And I think the power of community comes with really a couple of important things. First, it has a mentorship. There's people that have been through it before you, that have guided that path, and that can help you to get to where they are and where you want to be. And then it also has a cohort, a group of people that are going through the same thing you are, and want to grow through it. And so it introduced me to that concept that community is mostly like an aligned group that is going in a direction that you want to go. It has a mentorship aspect and a cohort aspect, and to kind of find those kinds of communities. And so over that course of that year, getting sober, I did something that I thought that I never could do, thanks to community, thanks to people behind me, mentorship, cohort. And I thought to myself, well, if I've done this, I realized that how many doors could open up for me because I'm now sober. I've done something I never thought that I could do. This is a point of reference for me on things that I could achieve that I never thought were possible. And the pieces were kind of coming together. And I remember that it was January of the following year. I had a year of sobriety, and I was always told within the rooms of recovery, don't make any major life changes in your first year of recovery. And I took that to heart and I didn't make any major life changes because I wanted to stay sober. But at 1 year, because we're A-type overachievers and we wanna do something right, I made the decision. I'm like, I'm gonna make a major life change. What am I gonna do? And my health was always an issue. I mean, I was a smoker for many years as well as, being an alcoholic. I didn't stop my junk food addiction when I got sober. And I was just like, yeah, maybe that's something that I can repair. What if I strive to be as healthy as I possibly could? And that brought my attention back to a few years prior when I was sitting on the couch watching the Ironman on television. The Ironman World Championship
Yep,
broadcast.
I know it well.
Yes. And I remember watching it in, like, 2006 and seeing John Blaze with ALS cross the finish line, and I watched I remember they were highlighting the Hoyt family, Dick and Rick Hoyt.
Oh, yeah, when he was pushing his son in that, special, device contraption that they built across the finish line.
That's right, yeah, yeah, so, it was just so inspiring to watch that, but in my mental state at that time, in the midst of alcoholism and scarcity and all of this, I just told myself that I could never do something like that. And even though I never thought about it again, it planted this seed, like, I could never do that again. So that when I had that year of sobriety and I was thinking, "How can I change my life? What major life change can I make?" I was thinking, "Well, that's BS." I mean, now I'm thinking about this and I was like, "I remember that. I remember how inspired I was by that. Why couldn't I do that?" And so like, over the next maybe month or 2, I did deep research on Ironman. The first thing I did was I said, "How do you sign up for the Ironman Hawaii?"
You you can't. Spoiler alert,
You
you
can't,
can't.
right. Spoiler, you can't. I realized it was, like, the top 1% of Ironman athletes that even qualify, and that I was in the most difficult age group possible for that. And so I said, "Okay, well, is there anything else I can do?" And I discovered that Ironman had a circuit of different races that you can participate in. Just if you spend at the time $700. And so I decided I'm gonna do an Ironman a year from now, in 2014, and look for an Ironman that would occur a year from then. Signed up for it without ever having any experience doing anything like that, and I decided that I would build the parachute on the way down with the goal of trying eventually to qualify for this race that I saw on television that I was so inspired by. That became the goal.
What was the venue for your first one?
The first venue, so I signed up for Ironman Cabo San Lucas, which when they did the full down there, it was in 2014, and, yeah, it was the closest one to where I lived in just north of San Diego, California. That was when they had the full venue. It was in 2014. And, yeah, it was, so I spent that whole year of 2013 just basically obsessively learning everything I could, and I hired a coach, obviously, because I remembered the mentorship and the cohort. So I essentially tried to find the coach and the community that I could, like, immerse myself in. And I found, at the time, it was Mark Allen online. And the reason I came to Mark Allen, sure you know who Mark Allen is, and for your audience, I one of the first experiences as I was researching Ironman, I discovered something called the Iron War, and that was the great race where Mark Allen was, for many years he was really trying hard to win the Ironman World Championship, and he was always falling short. And in 1989, he hired a coach named Phil Maffetone to help him to get to crack that nut because he was great at the shorter distance, but he was really struggling at that Ironman distance. And Maffetone taught him just a very simple training style that focused on heart rate and keeping energy levels down, like really, really low. And so I really resonated with that and saw that Mark Allen had, like, in this 1989 race just broke the world record, beat Dave Scott, like, and kept up with him all the whole race. And I was like, yeah, how do I train like Mark Allen? And I learned that he was a coach, and I was like, all right, I'll hire him. And so I hired him to help me with my first Ironman.
Awesome. I mean, you talk about, going to the best. You went from no triathlete experience to hiring the best coach you possibly could, to ensure success. And so, at every race that I go to, as I'm sure you know, the when during the race briefing, the race director asks who here is doing their first Ironman, and a whole bunch of hands go up, and then the subsequent question is who here is doing their first triathlon ever, and then a hand or
Yeah.
two goes up. So that was you. Your first triathlon was Ironman?
It wasn't. It was the first one I signed up for, but over the course of that year, I really learned, like, it's probably best to, like, maybe do a few and get a few under my belt
Okay, good. So
beforehand.
thanks.
So I
So
I,
you went the what I call the correct route, because some people learn about this thing called Ironman and they're like, I want to do that, and then they jump in with both feet, and it's actually their first triathlon, which I highly, highly advise against. Which I'm sure you would concur.
Same, yes. I couldn't imagine just jumping into the Sea of Cortez and swimming 2.4 miles without any experience in triathlon, yeah.
So go ahead. So continue with the story. Did you qualify for Kona during after that first race, or did you have to race more?
So I finished that race in the top 30% of the field, and I did way better than I thought I would. And you go into these first Ironmans and you really don't know what to expect. You do the training, and we were kind of talking offline a little bit about this idea of is the training going to be enough? Because you never really train the full distance of an Ironman. And part of it is just this faith that the training will get you there. And so I didn't I had goals, of course, that I wanted. I mean, my biggest goal was I want to qualify for the Ironman World Championship. My more realistic goal was I want to finish in the daylight. And then my more like extreme goal was, let's just finish. Let's finish this thing. And I raced it, and I was like, and I stuck to my plan, stuck to my strategy, and I felt really good throughout. And I finished in the top 30%. I finished in just under 11 hours. And I was like, wow, okay. I didn't qualify. There was quite a few people that finished ahead of me, and really fast guys that finished a couple hours ahead or about an hour ahead of me. And I realized that the last person to qualify for the world championship finished about 10%, I guess, 10% faster than me in the grand scheme of things. And I'm like, okay, so I have to just find 10%. And that became the goal over the next few races. So I raced over the next few years, 6 additional Ironmans. And at my 7th, which I'll talk about in a second, it was televised on a broadcast called Ironman Quest for Kona. I qualified at Ironman Santa Rosa.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was a really, really cool story. It came full circle because I I saw the Ironman World Championship on television, many years prior, and I'm like, I want to do that. But secretly, this ego part of me wanted to be one of the people on television doing it, wanted to be one of those inspiring stories. And I ended up seeing this casting call for this television show called Ironman Quest for Kona, back in 2017. And this was at a time where I was going to take a break from Ironman, but my lovely wife Marie told me that I should do it. I should audition for it. And so I did a silly audition video where I just did a whole bunch of stuff in my around the house in my Speedo and talked about why I should be on the show. And that video is still out there on YouTube if you want to find it somewhere.
Oh, I definitely will. We're gonna put that in the show notes. I thought I was a student of Iron Man for all these years, and I learned something today. I had no idea they had this Quest for Kona show. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was an experiment that they had, and I feel like they could have gone really far with it. The first season was really great. They highlighted 10 athletes that were all vying to compete to get to Kona of varying abilities and really really incredible people. And they became friends for life. Each of them had their own episodes, so there was 10 episodes. And so I got selected for my audition video, and yeah, they ended up filming me throughout my training process and following me the whole time. And I was one of 3 athletes on the series that qualified. And sadly, that that show is nowhere to be found except for on my website in Vimeo on Vimeo, because I think there's some weird copyright thing that Ironman is not addressing, and there's a bunch of those that are still on YouTube, but mine's not for some reason. But it was an amazing experience to actually qualify, and do it on television. Something that was on NBC Sports on deep cable on a Wednesday at 11 o'clock in the afternoon in the
That's
morning.
fantastic.
So
You got more coverage than most people get on the actual world championship. So congratulations for getting all that TV coverage. That's awesome.
thanks. It was an awesome it was a great time. And yeah, I got to race at Kona. So I finished third in my age group at Santa Rosa, at out of about 250-ish athletes in that age group. And
Yeah, you were in you were real in a really competitive age group, which makes it even harder to qualify.
yes, yeah.
But they do, for everybody listening that's interested in potentially qualifying one day, they do have this thing called roll down. So yes, the top three per age group usually get to qualify for the world championship. But if any of those three don't want to go for whatever reason, then it goes to the next person, and then the next person, then the next person. So I have several friends that have finished like 10th to 15th in their age group, and because of the roll down process, they still got to go to Kona. So there's hope for not fastest in the age group.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something definitely to strive for. And as you know, Stephen, having gone there yourself and raced at Kona, it's a life-changing experience. It's an incredible and incredibly difficult but rewarding experience.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So let's transition a little bit to business, because as you and I, we speak about it very often. There's so many similarities between endurance sports and entrepreneurship and the business world. And in your personal story, how has triathlon success in the Ironman and achieving such an incredible audacious goal, helped you form and achieve and strive towards audacity in the business world?
Yeah, so yeah, as I entered into the role of CEO of Hill Brothers, it was a challenging transition, because I was taking over the role of a generational company, legacy company that was already 90 something years old, and people were going to be reporting to me that had been with the company for forever, and I was this kind of new person coming up. So a lot of the same kind of feelings popped up when I was first thinking of Ironman, which are, there's a lot of unknowns. I don't know how to swim 2.4 miles in the ocean. I don't know what to expect as far as like how I'm going to manage these significant life-changing decisions with people like family. I wasn't prepared for things like relationships that I had once I entered into that role changing into something more transactional. So I didn't realize how lonely it would be in that position, to be honest. And I think that's where the resilience that was built through both sobriety and in Ironman gave me the fortitude to be able to look at it from the standpoint of creating a vision, and being able to visualize that difficult situation and how difficult it was, uh, to be able to visualize a path where it wasn't going to be that anymore. And then I think the newest part for me, though, I'd always done that. I'd done that through community in sobriety, for community helping me, and me working with other community in there, and with triathlon as a triathlon coach after doing this and building a community there. And now it was just about building this community within our organization to find that same to follow that same vision of what we could become. When I took over the company, we were really kind of struggling a bit. My dad had been the president of the company for about 25 years before I took over, and he helped to grow it through one of its greatest seasons of growth over the course of 2 decades. But between 2015 and 2020, we were starting to hit that ceiling where we were on the decline, and we were losing profitability. In my first year in the CEO role, we barely broke even. And then my second year, we went into the red for the first time in years. And it was just like all of these difficult decisions that I had to make that we hadn't made in decades. All of these sacred cows that I had to break and change. And it weighed really heavily on me, and it was really, really tough. But it was those tools or things that I learned through sobriety, through Ironman, that really helped me to know we could do this. We just have to be able to decide and execute and be consistent with it.
Mhm. Yeah, the sacred cow topic is something that's definitely, top of mind for a lot of founders, and especially in family-owned businesses. These decisions are, gut-wrenching to have to let go somebody that's been with the company since day one, or somebody that's actually, a relative. How did you deal with that? How did you approach those conversations? And like, do you have any, tips and tricks? Because I guarantee you, there's a percentage of people that are listening that are faced with this like today and are losing sleep over having to let go somebody that's near and dear to them, a best friend, or a relative. Any tips and tricks?
Yeah, it's hard, especially when you are a family member that's coming into that role, to make those types of decisions, especially right off the bat, like immediately, and hold that accountability, because I mentioned that the relationships change into something more transactional, because a lot of times those decisions aren't looked at as for the best, as for the greater good of the organization, because up until that point, the greater good has been seen as, let's keep everybody together and keep this as family. Whereas the real greater good is, let's keep this business sustainable for the greater good of everybody involved. And if we can't do that, the whole thing falls apart. So to answer your question, how did I handle that in the first few years? Not well. I mean, it really was challenged with making those decisions, to the point where I seemed very hamstrung to actually be able to make a lot of those decisions. But what really helped was, I was fortunate enough to be part of a mastermind that introduced me to a system, and I'm gonna, and it was EOS. I was introduced to Gino Wickman's book Traction at the time, and Gino Wickman created this system of EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and that was the really one of the things that changed it the most for me as a leader and for our organization. And I'm saying EOS specifically, but I think more specifically, it's a system. If you can build a system and align your team around a system that helps to take the weight of those decisions off the shoulders of one person and put it on the organization, and creates a vision for the greater good and gives you the tools to execute on it. I think that's what helps to alleviate some of those, because it really puts the accountability on a system that everybody's following, not just these sacred cows or all of that you're working on. So EOS was the thing that I drove towards, and I was attracted to EOS because of its simplicity. I read the book in a weekend, and just the fact that it was based on this concept that you want to strengthen six key components in your business that include, the vision, the people, the data, the issues, the process, and then ultimately building execution with traction. That really spoke to me, because I just love a simple process and a framework. That's why I love the Maffetone method. It was just a simple framework.
So EOS, or a system, really allows a founder or CEO or a person in authority to use the system as bad cop, right? Instead of saying, "Hey, I need to let you go," or "We need to replace you," it's the system does not allow for you to be part of this organization going forward. Am I saying that correctly?
Absolutely. I mean, and yeah, with in particular with right people, right seats, taking that example, if it's a person that you're struggling with, or and it's a family member, you might be conceptually thinking, I got a problem with this person. He's just not performing, or this or she's not performing, or and they're just really annoying me, and I can't figure out why. If there's not a system around it to determine the why, and how they're not performing up to speed, and that everyone agrees with, that conversation is going to go really difficult, because you're going to call them into your office and you're going to say, Joe or Barbara, you're just really annoying me. And that conversation doesn't go well,
No.
especially with family members. But if you have a set of core values that you're all aligned around, if you have a set of core processes and you have the data to back that up, and you can go into that room and saying, hey, Joe, you're doing really great at these specific core values, and how we said, and we all agreed in here, that we're going to align around these core values and we're going to work towards this vision. Well, you're doing great around these three or four core values, but this one, really struggling. And I want to figure out how we can get better at that. And if we can't get better, we're going to have to make a hard decision there. And I know you're my uncle or my cousin or whatever, but that's not the point here. We're looking towards the greater good, and we have to align around that. that makes that conversation more of a coaching conversation rather than a real like just kind of back and forth non-structured conversation that it would have been otherwise.
Gotcha, gotcha. You make it sound really easy. You picked up a book, you love the methodology, you implemented it at work, and you had success. Can most people do that, or are they better served by hiring a certified EOS implementer like you are?
It's totally easy. All you have to do is buy the book, and then you've solved it completely, and everything's solved in your life. I'm totally
Oh
kidding,
my
but
God.
no. It would be amazing if that were the case. I would buy that book for $1 million. Um, but uh, uh, but but no, reality it was not an overnight success. It takes aligning everyone around that.
So do you have to like buy 45 copies and give it to your leadership team and say, this is the methodology that we're adopting as a company?
Yes, ultimately, what we did, and I'll share kind of what we did, and what I think works best is I read the book. I ended up reaching out to an implementer named Richard Price, who worked with us. He came in and he delivered the meeting to our leadership team, and the way that we really sold it to our leadership team was, look, many of you are frustrated, and these are the frustrations that leadership teams are facing. They don't feel that they can control their particular department. They feel like their people are frustrating. We can't get a hold of people. They don't feel like they've got to manage it. They don't feel like we're making the profit that we need to make, and they feel like they're hitting a ceiling we can't break through. And we need a system to do that. Can everybody agree that we need a system to improve upon that? Yes, yes, yes. Great. Here's somebody that can help us with a system to help do that. Let's hear him out and see how it goes. That's the way we approached it, so that we got agreement on, do we need to fix this, or are you just happy with the status quo? And if anyone's happy with the status quo, that's the point that we have an issue. But if most of the people were on board with the idea that we need to make a change and we need a system for that, then it was just like, well, let's look at this system that has been adopted by tens of thousands of companies all over the world, and the average revenue increase for those companies is about 40% in 2 years. And so let's look at that one. And so we did, and we got alignment on it. I think that ultimately the choice between hiring an implementer or self-implementing is a very individual one. Both can work, and there's some companies that can successfully self-implement. I think for family businesses in particular, and I know that I would have struggled with self-implementing, because I would have had to learn a system, learn how to implement it, and then also be successful in getting everyone to adopt it. But the great thing about an implementer is that they give you that outside of the box perspective, and they give you that ability to facilitate and accelerate the process, because they already know where you've been. They know how you've done it. So our experience over the course of 2 years of implementing that with an implementer, while it wasn't an overnight success, like I said, in 2 years we grew our revenues by about 50%, turning us into a nine-figure business. We became sustainably profitable again, and we brought much cash into the bank, to the point where we're in the best financial position we've ever been in today. And our team is aligned around a vision that we're really excited about pursuing.
That's fantastic. So, is EOS only for, I guess, for quote unquote, turnaround situations, or is it something that a company can adopt for longer term?
It's definitely a longer term. Usually, when you're working with an implementer, it's anywhere between a 2-3 year process, depending on the company. It could be they work with an implementer forever, but ultimately, once you get the tools, and once you start to implement the tools, these are tools that you can consistently use for the life of the business, as long as you want to be a growing company. Really, the condition is that the companies that it works best for are where the leadership teams are growth oriented. They're open minded to being open and honest with each other, so that they can go into the room and they can talk about the key issues without letting egos get in the way, and all the feelings and emotions that tend to drive all of that negative decision making. So it's really important to have a leadership team that is open minded to changing, and growing.
Gotcha, 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 gotcha. So switching gears again, that's something that I find a lot of fun, and it's really interesting that you're so consistent with it. You are the master of puns. or or dad jokes. So for anybody listening, please follow Adam Hill on Facebook if you want just a daily dose of just something that's really really cute, often very funny, and the conversation that ensues is also really entertaining because it's basically a whole bunch of other people punning on your puns, which I try to. I'm not as good as you are. Also, Adam's TEDx talk is 15 minutes of a speech delivered in puns, which is fascinating. So I understand why they chose you immediately and how you got on the TEDx stage so fast. So I'm jealous. Um, can you please share that journey and how you became the pun master?
Yeah, so it was 2015, and as you know, that was around the time where Facebook was starting to get really, really kind of polarized and very political, and every post you see just started to get really just negative, and I found that I was being consumed by it. I was participating in that, and I was not really happy with that. And I just noticed that it was really affecting who I was and how I showed up, and I got really tired of participating in that. So in 2015, I made a decision to stop watching the news completely, because I knew that that was infringing on my life, and also stop participating in the negativity that was on social media, and even going so far as to unfollow people that were just like really consistently doing it on both sides of the aisle. And instead, I decided, well, maybe I'll just post a dumb joke every day, and just do that to kind of as like my little resistance to all of the negativity that's happening on Facebook.
Let's mix it up. Let's mix it up a bit on a daily basis with some dad jokes.
Right, right. So I want to piss people off in a different way is what I wanted to do. But so I think my first joke was this really long drawn out joke about a pirate. I don't even remember really what it was, but it was super long, and I realized I'm not going to be able to sustain like a super long joke every day. So why don't I just make it like a one thing? And I'll start off by saying in 2015 I was not really great at puns. I just kind of I didn't know him, and I had to kind of look him up a lot of times. But what happened was is I just posted a stupid pun or a stupid joke every single day. I found that people started participating, and it got me thinking. And early in the morning, like when I do that first thing in the morning, it got my mind thinking creatively, which got me out of anxiety, which got me out of negativity. It got me into this positive state. And then what I would do throughout the day is I would check in on it, and I would see other people posting. And over time, people would start like saying their own puns to my pun. And, like if it was something about wearing a sweater or something like that, like I'd post a pun about a sweater, somebody might comment and say, "Oh, you're so close minded,"
Oh
and
my god, so
something dumb like
so
that, right?
corny, so corny.
Yeah. But it was so dumb that, like,
Yeah.
I'd check in and it would, like, really immediately shift my mood throughout the day. I'd be seeing these positive notices throughout the day instead of checking in on Facebook and seeing negative political stuff that I felt compelled to inject my opinion on. I was just doing dumb jokes, and I felt way better. And over the course of the next many years, 3,000 puns later, I did a TED Talk on it and just kinda shared, that a lot of times we immerse ourselves in the negativity of the world. And one of the best ways that we can get out of that is to stop engaging with the negativity and just do something creative and fun every day. And that drives us to the change that we want to make in the world.
I love that. I love that. So for everybody's knowledge, this was Adam's post. In our house, I'm responsible for making sure all of our phones have full power. You could say I'm in charge of that. And the list goes on and on and on, and the responses are very very entertaining. So kudos for just the consistency is key to a lot of social media success, and you're just literally, I mean, it's something that I can rely on every single day is to get a dose of Adam in the morning.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, no, thank you, thank you. Yeah, again, we'll put a link to your TEDx talk, which I think was fascinating that you can deliver a full what was like 12 or 15 minutes with like one pun after another. It was really informative and entertaining. So you've set and achieved some audacious goals. What's next for you personally?
Yeah, next for me is I've fully. I became an EOS implementer back in November of 2024. I fell so in love with that system and what it did for us that I ended up not only implementing in our business, but in my family and in my life. And I can truly say that now I'm living this quote unquote EOS life where I feel freer today. I'm doing more of the things that I love, focused on my passions, and seeing the results I want in my family and my business, to the point where my relationship with my wife is a 10 now. My kids are getting up there with regards to how we're engaging with them, and the business is doing great, in the best position it's ever been in. And I wanted to help. I realized that looking at where I started in the family business, not really feeling like I had control over it, not feeling like I was really able to be prepared for it. I really feel compelled now to take this next phase of my life and help leaders, especially of family businesses, to get more control over their business so that they can get better freedom. Whether they're choosing to have an exit in their business, that's something that certainly that you can help them with, or they're looking to just build a business that they want to pass on to their kids. It's about building that value into the business first, and I think that comes with EOS, and EOS can help them do that in their family and in their lives and in their business.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, you benefited from it so much. Sounds like that. I'm paying it forward and helping others. Realize how it can help them. Must be super rewarding. So thank you for doing that. And you just said something that I wasn't aware of. So EOS is an entrepreneurial operating system. That's what it stands for. But you just said that it can actually be utilized for your life and for your family. Can you just elaborate a little bit on how it can help one in their family life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and EOS. I'll say, by the way, just to fully disclaim this, that entrepreneurial operating system is not meant to be implemented in the family or in and then, so they don't sanction any of that. But I've taken a lot of those same tools, like a weekly meeting, a level 10 meeting, or focusing on things like process and making sure that we're executing in quarterly meetings, especially that meeting pulse that happens in EOS, incorporating that into our family life, having weekly meetings with our kids, with my wife, and just talking about the most important things openly and honestly, and with leading with love, has just really improved that. And I've talked to a number of other couples about that too, and it may not necessarily be for everybody, just like EOS is not for every business. It really, I think, in my opinion, it takes this alignment between both parties in the spousal relationship to really want it, and to make sure that they want to make that particular element work. But for my wife and I, Marie and I, it really works, and yeah, it's made a big difference in our life.
Fantastic. That is great.
Mhm.
Adam, you're a wealth of knowledge on so many things, from EOS personally to professionally to triathlon training to, overcoming, addictions to achieving great things. If anybody wants to reach out to you, where is the best place for them to reach you?
Yeah, you can reach me on my website now is www.eosworldwide.com/Adam-Hill, or you can email me if you want to reach out at adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. Love to hear from you. I'm also on LinkedIn at Adam Chill, ADAMCHILL. I'm lucky enough to have C as my middle initial, so that I can say Adam Chill as my handle.
Ad- Adam Chill. That is fantastic. We'll use that as your call sign going forward.
Awesome.
Adam, thank you so much for being on the show. It was fantastic catching up with you, and you've shared some really actionable advice for folks to take forward so that to help them set and achieve audacious goals. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. This is always an honor, Stephen. I'm so grateful to you, man.
No, it's been a blast. So thank you all very much for listening and watching this episode of Built to Finish. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do like and subscribe. It definitely does help the show a lot. And if you found any of the information that Adam shared to be useful to somebody in your network, please do share this episode with them. Thank you so much for tuning in today. That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stephenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.